The gun to be fired by the Prime Minister of New Zealand. The cannon echoes around North Head. There's a tremendous cheer from the thousands thronging around the waterfront. And the third leg of the fourth Whitbread Round the World Yacht Race is underway, with a squadron of aircraft, helicopters all circling above. The cavalry charge seems to have started, and seem to be a whole bunch of people anxious to impair the progress of the boats.
When you think of New Zealand's greatest achievements in sailing, there are two that stand out: the America's Cup and the Whitbread Round the World race. Both have put their sailing teams and indeed the country on the map. As well as being superb sailors, innovation has played an important part of their success. But it's also provided the foundations of a marine industry that has spread well beyond racing. Having a stopover here in Auckland played a big part in drawing attention to what the Kiwis could do. But for all kinds of reasons, the city hasn't hosted the offshore race since 2018. And the country hasn't had a full New Zealand entry in the race since 2011 with Camper and Team New Zealand. So when the news broke that the Offshore Classic would be returning to Auckland, it was a big deal. And then came the announcement of a brand new Kiwi team led by Vendée Globe skipper Conrad Colman. It's been big news here in the south. So what better a setting to talk about all of this than aboard the classic Whitbread boat Steinlager II. But first, I had to have a look around. Now there's no doubt that Steinlager II is a classic boat. It's an unmistakable boat too, a very, very famous offshore boat. But one of the things that's really interesting when you come down below is it is a stark and glaring reminder of just how much things have changed. It is a pretty sparse boat. It's basically just berths, that's it. But the thing that you notice straight away is how many berths there are. There's something like 24 berths on board, which is completely different. Obviously nowadays on an Imoca a full crew is 4 people, but it is amazing. Look at all this headroom, for example. I mean, totally different to today. And of course, unmistakably, aluminium mast. Well, it's been a long time since we've seen an aluminium mast on a race boat, and I suspect we're not going to see one again. Then moving back, yes, modern race boats all have galleys, but their galleys are usually a kettle and a burner with a freeze dried. Not on Steinlager II it wasn't. Whacking great oven, 4 burners there, an absolutely superb galley, great big deep fiddles, all the kind of things you find on a cruising boat. Pipe cots. I love all this. The names of the original crew on board, and so many of them have become names that we've come to know in all kinds of teams and successes. Kevin Shoebridge, Glenn Sowery over there, Barry Mackay I see up there. Great big area here where the engine is, and oops, tripped over it myself. And the nav station, and then mind your head on that as you go backwards. But the grinding pedestals here. But I mean, there's so much space on board this boat. I mean, it is 80 foot after all, compared to an Imoca, which is 60 foot and has got absolutely no freeboard and no headroom. Oh, and take a look at this. This is the nav station here. What luxury. Nice seat, table, all your instruments there. And they didn't even have the internet. Double hatches as well, so there's a walkway just behind where the camera is and out onto the deck behind the twin wheels, and still more berths back here. But just have a look over here, Ellie, on the top berth over here, the most famous name of all, Sir Peter Blake, the man behind this campaign, the man who inspired so much of New Zealand's racing scene, was behind Team New Zealand as well, and who was behind this team. And if we go down this side, it's all the same down here as well. It's just yet more bunks, more berths. One of the things, I mean, it looks easy to move around in now, and it is, because one of the things that it would have looked very different when it was racing around the world, because they had a lot of sails, and the sails would have been stacked down here or put up on the windward side. There'd be sails all over the place. Nowadays, in her current configuration, she's got a furling headsail and nowhere near the sail wardrobe that they carried back in the day. Now, of course, there's no getting away from the fact that the reason this boat is so famous is that it won every single leg of the 1989-90 Whitbread race. No other team has done that in any of the other races. It was a blisteringly quick boat. But there was another reason why this boat was significant. It wasn't alone in this. It was an interesting era. In the late 80s, I hadn't actually become a journalist then, and in my previous life, I used to work for a mast maker, Proctor Masts, where I was involved in the racing scene there. And we were looking at this boat very closely, because at Proctor's we were building all kinds of masts, but we built quite a lot of offshore masts for the Whitbread Round the World race. And we were looking very closely at this boat. We didn't build the mast, but the reason we were looking closely was that it was a ketch rig. And a ketch rig, 2 masts, was very unusual aboard a race boat back then. And there were lots of question marks as to whether it would really work. The broad rationale behind it was that putting a second mast out the back, under the handicap system, the measurement rule for the boat, you could set a sail between the top of the aft mast that came down to here that wasn't measured. In effect, it was free area. You were getting free horsepower that wasn't related to your handicap. And on certain points of sail, it meant that the boat was potentially a lot quicker. The downside was that there was a lot more complexity. You had 2 masts. This sail plan was slightly smaller as a result. And also there was an awful lot of drag, an aerodynamic wind drag from that mast. And also from an engineering point of view, it was actually very difficult to make the numbers stack up to keep that mast in the back of the boat. And there was a lot of question marks as to whether this would really work. And of course the race proved it did. But the funny thing is, the irony is, I remember being in design meetings talking about the ketch rig and whether it would really work in the Whitbread Round the World race. And there was a big feeling that actually there was a big risk that they would lose the mast out the back of the boat. Well, here we are over 30 years later, and it's still there. So what about the news of the Auckland stopover? Why?
Well, bringing the ocean race back to Auckland, back to New Zealand, is very important, because this is a big part of the history of this race. And we have great Kiwis who have been instrumental in the history of the race, with Sir Peter Blake, Grant Dalton, Pete Burling has done it as well. So we have this strong heritage of Kiwi sailors. But more so, the sailors from around the world, when they come into Auckland, when they come to New Zealand, they just love it, because this is the city of sail. And importantly, it's often after a very tough journey through the Southern Ocean that the sailors arrive into Auckland, and it's before the toughest leg, going down into the Southern Ocean around Cape Horn. So it's always very loaded arrivals and very tense starts. And the fans in Auckland and New Zealand, it's like nowhere else in the world. So bringing the race back to Auckland and New Zealand is something we are very, very happy about and very proud about.
That pride is just what is driving Vendée Globe skipper Conrad Colman. His next project is to do another lap of the planet, this time fully crewed, with a New Zealand team.
The concept is that we are building a new national sports team here in New Zealand. By the way, we're in Auckland, and that's because we are, standing here on Steinlager II, which, when I was a young boy growing up here in Auckland, was incredibly inspirational. It's amazing walking around down below and looking at all of the names on the bunks and all of the old legends that have sailed on this boat over the years, and the effect that had on everybody that was sort of my generation or similar. And it's been a long time, since 2012, so 15 years since there was last a Kiwi flagged entry in the Volvo, which has now become the ocean race, and I want to rectify that. I've done 4 races around the world now, As a skipper, as a proud Kiwi, I'd like to break the drought of New Zealand entries. This is something that has, for a long, long time, has been incredibly powerful and has been a big part of New Zealand sailing culture. And I sort of found myself by happy accident as somebody who has invested the last 15 years in figuring out how to make an Emoka go really fast. And then that class got adopted by the ocean race in this new generation. And I sort of found myself at the nexus between these two worlds colliding. And so I kind of feel like not only is it an opportunity, but it's almost a responsibility to, it's a little bit audacious. It's going to be complicated, but I'm excited about the challenge of getting a New Zealand racing team back in the race. And this race, this sailing yacht and its team won the race. Many New Zealand campaigns have won this race, and so sort of honouring the legacy of everybody that's come before us and all the blood, sweat and tears that have been invested in this race over the decades since 1973. Well, it'd be nice to show up at the start line with the opportunity to win the race at least.
Combining that with the stopover in Auckland makes this an even bigger deal, as Conrad's co-founder explains.
Yeah, it's kind of fundamental, and not only from a sailing perspective, but from a sailing economics standpoint as well. Because as you say, we've got a legacy in the ocean race. There's legends, men and women who've been before us, and now obviously we've got to live up to their expectations, but carve out our own identity as well. So to make that happen, we only, need to build an amazing crew, but also the sustainability and business side behind that as well. So it's a 4-year project to start with, but we're really putting the building blocks in place so that the legacy with people like New Zealand Sailing Trust, which we're on board with at the moment, can be a part of that and be a stakeholder and create pathways for youth in the future in ocean racing.
And that pathway was the reason we were aboard Steinlager II. Tell us about the people that you take sailing. You're working with young adults, children mainly, isn't it, with schools?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, most of our numbers, we take about 1,200 young people from around New Zealand, and mostly school groups. So we will customise a trip to each school. The group we're meeting today is part of a 21-day program, and we take the students for 5 days of that 21 days that those students are away from home. So it's really building their resilience, and of course ties in really well with our values of teaching people about teamwork, leadership and courage.
And what age are they?
We take mainly 14 to 19, and this group will be 14, and they're away for 5 days.
And the area that they're sailing, do they go off on long distance offshore passages, or is it mainly, do they?
Certainly. So our operating area is from the Bay of Islands to the Bay of Plenty. And
wow.
Yeah, and so within 5 days they typically can, if the weather conditions allow, can get out to Aotea, Great Barrier Island, or the Mokihinau's. So for today's group, they may not get as far as Barry, but they may do.
These kids, they don't necessarily have any sailing experience.
No, often not, and which makes it a wonderful platform and sort of neutral territory for these students or young people to work together, and we work a watch system. So they all get a go at being at the helm with the skipper and learning about navigation and the fundamentals of sailing. So they don't learn how to sail, but inspire them to take it up or to get involved once they get back to school.
It's not just me, is it, Martin? This is a special boat.
It's a very, very special boat, Big Red, and I've been on it a number of times. I'm always thrilled when I come up. We've talked about all the names around the boat, and they've all gone on to become absolute legends. But this one, because it won every leg, and that was something unique at the time, it's just got a special magic to it. I'd love to see it at any stage. We see it a lot in Auckland as well, because it's well used, which is great because it's bringing in new generations of sailors. But it just has the most amazing history, and I guess Peter Blake, he is an absolute legend, and so much of what we've done today really sheets back to him in very many ways. The viaduct, all the extensions of the viaduct, the America's Cup, all that came out of Peter Blake, and this boat made him the legend that helped create another new bunch of legends.
Yeah, it is remarkable. I mean, the other thing that's remarkable, I think, is that its role now in taking out hundreds, if not thousands, of young people and yet it was a Grand Prix race machine, and it hasn't really been dumbed down that much. I mean, it's got a furling head saw,
Yeah.
but it's still got pedestal grinders, and it's still got a whole load of winches. But to run a boat like this for a truss, and not just one, but two of them, is something else.
Well, Lion, I've got a personal affinity with Lion, because that was the first interview I ever did in New Zealand, 2 hours off the plane back in whatever year it was beside the upturned hull of Lion with Peter Blake and Ron Holland.
Right.
And that was the story behind that was that the connection was that it was a sister ship, Lion, to what was Colt Carr's GB, which went on to become Drum. And because I was doing a story about the connection between England and here. And so what they've done to Lion, I mean, it looks absolutely immaculate now. And you see, occasionally you get a little, glimpses of all this history together, like when they brought the boat Maiden in. So Tracy Edwards brought Maiden in here recently.
Right.
She was here in the coordination with the movie, Maiden the movie, because the reception they got here was something extraordinary. And it was Peter Blake who handed the Yachtsman of the Year award to Tracy Edwards, this little dot as the commentator, PJ, Peter Montgomery's son. And that history was repeated here not just a few years ago,
right,
when you'd got Maiden, Lion and Steinlager all in a line sailing down the harbour with the city in the background. And you thought, wow, this is something. And I mean, Maiden was an inspiration. That was, and that was all. It's all kind of connected.
Yeah. So having that, I mean, we're not hamming it up then. So having Conrad Colman announce his Kiwi team and having this is a stopover venue. That's the combination.
Well, the stronger the Kiwi connection, obviously, then from a local point of view. But if you ask in all the years when the races visited here, this is where the sailors like most to come as well, because they know they can get everything done. They know that it is the city of sails still, and they know that they can, anything they need for the boat they can get done and get it done well.
Yeah.
So, take the news of the return of the Auckland stopover, the announcement of a new Kiwi team, and a trip aboard the world's most famous offshore machine, and you have a pretty perfect day aboard a 36-year-old boat that can still pull a crowd.